This is an I Am Listening original podcast.
We've got so many opportunities actually right across the UK for young people to be able to do that. So I think it is a very positive policy. And it demonstrates once again that the Prime Minister's got a clear plan and willing to take that bold action to deliver long term for the United Kingdom.
Welcome to the Kent Politics Podcast, your go-to source for insightful discussions on local and national political matters. Join us as we take a deep dive into local government across the county. Find out what the key decision makers have to say, what your money is being spent on, and how the party's policies could affect how we live. Plus, don't miss our regular feature, Westminster Watch, where we dissect the latest developments and decisions shaping the political landscape in the heart of the UK's capital. Engage with us as we delve into the issues that matter to you and explore the dynamic world of politics from a Kent perspective.
Welcome to the Kent Politics Podcast. In a week it's raining roadworks in Raynham, a Kent Councillor stands for Parliament in Scotland, and there's a spat over a press release about potholes. I'm Simon Fidley and I cover Kent County Council, and I'm joined by Dan Essen, who keeps a beady eye on borough and district councils.
Hello.
And Robert Boddy, who reports on Medway Council.
Hello.
And we're also joined by KM political editor Paul Francis, who'll be bringing us his thoughts on the general election so far.
Hello.
And this week's special guest is George Perfect, who is the Conservative group leader on Medway Council. Robert, it's over to you. Never dull moment in Medway. What stood out for you this week?
So, a problem which most listeners will not be unfamiliar with is traffic, particularly because of roadworks. But particularly affected in Raynham have been businesses who say they've been losing thousands of pounds per week due to consistent roadworks cropping up all the time and driving people away.
So what's the situation on how much our business is actually losing?
So traders on Raynham High Street are saying that the council, that's Medway Council, but also Kent County Council, who are responsible for some of the roadworks, owe them compensation because they're losing an estimated £2,000 every single weekend because of backlogs of traffic are putting customers off visiting and making others cancel their orders because deliveries take too long because they're stuck in the gridlock. Medway Council's portfolio holder for climate change and strategic regeneration, Simon Curry, said he acknowledged road repairs were often disjointed and not coordinated, and despite efforts it was difficult to coordinate works. However, he also encouraged businesses to get in touch with him to discuss the issue and the possibility of compensation.
Turning to you, Dan, what's been happening down your way?
So I've been looking at something both local and national. It's come to my attention that Canterbury City Councillor Elizabeth Carr-Ellis, who's councillor for the ward where I live as it happens, is trying her hand at a bid for Parliament, but nowhere around here. She's actually standing over 500 miles away for the new constituency of Angus and Perthshire Glens in the Scottish Highlands.
Does she have any connection to Scotland?
Yeah, it's important to stress it isn't sort of bog standard case of parachute candidate, though that thing is, as everyone knows, quite common. She does actually have a connection to the seat. It's not a routine case of a candidate being parachuted in. She used to live in Scotland, she met her husband in Scotland, and she used to work for the Scotsman newspaper.
Is this kind of thing common?
Short of it is, yeah, it is quite common. I don't think it can be stressed enough that politics, in terms of your active members of parties and activists, is an extremely small world. Relative to the population as a whole, the number of people really involved in politics is quite minuscule. So as such, pretty much every local authority in the country will have at least one or two councillors who are trying their hand at a bid for Parliament, whether nearby or extremely far away. Not even in Kent, for example. Robert did a story a few weeks ago, as I remember, with a councillor from Chatham who was selected as the Labour candidate for Tewkesbury over in Gloucestershire. Parties seem to broadly accept this as well. A local candidate is obviously usually preferable for optics reasons, but it's pretty well known that as an aspiring MP you can try to be a candidate pretty much anywhere you want, and in some contexts you can even tell your party that you can choose to stand for a seat and just put the option as any, so you tell them you take a candidacy anywhere they're giving it.
Yeah, it's the first time. They'll often sort of fight no hope, won't they?
Yeah, and technically there's no residency requirement to be a British MP whatsoever. You don't even need to permanently live in this country to be an MP, though that doesn't happen nearly as often.
So anything of note happening in County Hall, Simon?
We're quite a county hall now. The election has been called, and it's the half-term week. But there was a bit of the usual sort of pre-election squabbling this week. Kent County Council issued a press release last Friday trumpeting that work has begun on the never-ending pothole scourge. But on closer examination, there was nothing actually new in this release, just repeating what was said before and stuff that's been previously in the public domain. But the Liberal Democrat candidate in Maidstone and Malling, David Nagy, accused the ruling Conservatives of, quotes, blatant electioneering, quotes.
And how did the Conservatives respond to that?
Well, the guy in charge of highways at KCC is a chap called Neil Baker, and he put it into some sort of context. That particular press release announcing the pothole blitz, as they called it, had been in the system for weeks, if not months, before the election had been called and went out before the general election officially started on May the 25th. Still, it's added a little bit of spice to the election campaign and confirmation, if it was needed, that the campaign is officially underway and that there is likely to be a lot more of this sniping to come. We now turn to Paul Francis, the KM Group political editor, and just to find out what's caught your attention.
Well, you couldn't avoid it, but Nigel Farage is back in town with his rolling roadshow to promote the Reform Party, which born out of the embers of the UKIP party, which Nigel Farage used to lead. And he still showed that he's got a bit of the mesmerising sparkle about him in some people's eyes. He's a fantastic political operator. The media, of course, take a slightly different tack to that, but it was no surprise that he drew reporters, correspondents and journalists from far and wide to his press launch.
Everybody covered it. I mean, that's what he does.
Exactly, yes. And it was a bit like deja vu for me. You listen to what he was saying about immigration, small boats, and it seemed to be fairly familiar rhetoric from 4 or 5 years ago when he was doing this first of all. But you can't deny he's a very astute political operator. He still galvanises support amongst certain people, but he is the ultimate Marmite politician, as we've said before.
And Dover's an interesting constituency in that, obviously, now the Elphick jumped ship. The Conservatives haven't named a candidate so far, and Farage isn't going to be standing. So it makes you wonder, just what the Tories are going to do there.
Yeah, I mean, on Farage, he was asked whether he was a bit of a coward for not standing, to which he dismissed that charge and said he would be a more effective operator if he was given free range to kind of preach the Farage philosophy across the UK. But you're right, Dover is going to be a very interesting tussle. And I think what's troubling some Conservatives is that they're in a rush now to appoint candidates before the official nomination papers have to go in, which I believe is the end of next week. And they still haven't got candidates in place. Now, we're losing 4 other MPs from the county in this general exodus, and it's a bit worrying.
So that means that we've got Greg Clark, Greg McKinley, Dame Tracy Crouch,
and Natalie Elphick.
And one more.
Gord Henderson.
Yeah, so that's the 5 that are going to be standing.
Yeah, I mean, I think the point to emphasise here is that for many of those, there are justifiable reasons for wanting to leave or to stand aside. But it's Rishi Sunak's coming under a bit of flack for having triggered the election battle at a time when they haven't got candidates in place.
Yeah, well, interesting development in the last day or two that Iain Dale, who we all know was a political sort of commentator, but also a presenter on LBC, he is in the running, or has been in the running, for the berth at Tunbridge Wells vacated by Greg Clark, as mentioned earlier.
Yes, and the association tells me that they'll be selecting from a short list over the weekend. Now, my question was who's on that short list, but no one would tell me. Iain Dale's volunteered the information himself. But he has the advantage of being local, but he has tried before, and he's got had some interesting things to say about the area that he wants to stand in, and not always terribly flattering about the constituency. So it's a wait and see for me. I feel he's maybe come out of the traps a bit too fast.
Thanks, chaps, for your contributions, and we'll speak a little bit later before the end of the programme. And I'm going to hand over to Robert, who will be interviewing George Perfect.
Is there a topic that you would like to be discussed on the Kent Politics podcast? Perhaps you've got a question for one of our panel, or you'd like to comment on a hot topic in local or national government. Get in touch by emailing or sending a voice note to kentpoliticspodcast@thekmgroup.co.uk.
The Medway Tories suffered a major political defeat just over a year ago when, for the first time in 20 years, they lost control of Medway Council. But now they've chosen their new leader, who says he represents the new dawn for the group and will lead them to victory in 2027. Councillor George Perfect joins us on the show. Hello, George.
Hello, Robert.
So, I mean, just explain to listeners, what is sort of this new dawn, as you termed it? What's going to change about the Conservative group in Medway?
Well, look, we suffered, as you've just referenced, one of our most difficult local election results here in Medway in our history in 2023. After 20 years of successfully leading Medway Council, we were reduced to 22 councillors and the role of being the principal opposition, which is never an easy position to be in. Over the past 12 months, really, we've focused under the leadership of my great colleague and friend, Councillor Adrian Golvin, really on steadying the ship and on sort of beginning to sort of plot our way forward following that loss. The group unanimously elected me as the leader just a couple of weeks ago. I laid out to the group over the last few months a really concrete vision of what our group will look like in 2027, the work we need to do in order to get ourselves into that place. And also, whilst working on behalf of the residents that we serve through our wards that we serve, 21 councillors, from right across all three of Medway's constituency associations, representing residents and championing their concerns, as well as holding the administration to account on those pan-Medway-wide issues, whether it be adult social care, children's services, or indeed matters on regeneration. So we've got a really important job to do over the forthcoming year, in particular, holding the administration to account. But as I say, one of my top priorities is ensuring that we're in a place in 2027 and beyond to take back Medway Council and focus really on the future of Medway and that vision that will underpin all of that.
And so, I mean, just over a year ago now, it was sort of that, as you say, that difficult local election result. I mean, what do you think was the message that you took from that? And therefore, what are you sort of going to look in the next couple of years to be changing and doing differently?
Well, look, I think we took from the result last year a couple of things. First of all, obviously, as we know, there was a lot of dissatisfaction with things that had happened nationally. I think we would be wrong if we didn't acknowledge that. But I think also the public, voted for Labour on a local level because of the campaign that they'd run and on local issues as well. And that had a strong part of that. I think when any administration, is in power for 20 years, you get to you work through issues, and you sort of, what's the word? You come to the decisions that you take because obviously you've been running the organisation for a very long period of time. I think when you lose elections, and anybody who loses any election, I think around the world, it's the right time to sit back, reflect on things we've done in the past, reflect on things that we perhaps we'd had in our manifesto and had planned, and look to build a future that's really positive and recognises some of the new and exciting things that the group wants really to focus on, and priorities that they see for Medway whilst out of the administration and running the council.
And you mentioned there, obviously, reflection on sort of the Conservatives' time running Medway Council and sort of why maybe the people of Medway had chosen not to vote for you in 2023. I mean, one of the things that happened in this year, back in February, was Councillor Elizabeth Turpin, who was the deputy leader of the Medway Tories, left the group basically saying that there'd been a refusal to sort of acknowledge mistakes that the previous administration had made. How do you recognise that?
Well, I think I don't agree with Councillor Turpin's view of where we are at. I think she was deeply unhappy with a number of things that were taken, decisions that were taken by the previous administration, and obviously she's documented those in interviews she's given to herself and elsewhere. But I think a number of those decisions were decisions that were taken some time ago. They were taken when we were in control of the council and were taken on the decisions, and actually many of those decisions were the right ones in the long-term interests of Medway. But you can't sit here now and begin to pick apart everything we've done over the past 20 years and in the public sphere, because that's not really helpful. What I'm focused on is the future. What does that vision look like? How do we build a positive vision for Medway? How do we build across all of the wards within Medway a vision that works for everyone, and particularly putting community at the centre of that? And that's what my job is as leader of the opposition, and as leader of the Medway Conservatives is to outline that vision. So we're very much focused on the future, not in the past. And I appreciate Councillor Turpin wanted to spend some significant time dwelling on individual policy decisions over the past. But as I say, we've spent the past year reviewing those decisions, and we're now looking to move forward and to set a positive vision for Medway for the future.
Now, obviously, looking forward to the future, as you say, we're now in an election campaign. July the 4th is obviously the big day to look really far into the future. Pollsters, as much as we can trust them, suggest that the 3 Medway seats are all going to flip from being Conservative-held seats by Kelly Torhurst, Tracy Crouch, who's obviously stepping down, but also Raymond Chishti, to Labour. I mean, are you worried about that eventuality?
I think, look, we're out fighting for every vote. Every election is fought on the day. We've still got over 5 weeks of this campaign to go. We're only a week in, and voters have got a very clear choice. They've got a choice with the Conservatives and Rishi Sunak of a clear plan, bold action, which will lead to a secure future, or Labour and his 3 candidates in Medway that offer no plan. They want to take the easy way out and offer an uncertain future for people in Medway and right around the UK. So I think, look, we're going to be fighting hard for every vote. We recognise we've been in government, as I've said, for 14 years. And this has been the most difficult parliament, I think, since the Second World War, with the COVID-19 pandemic, war in Ukraine, and the economic impacts of all of that. But look, we're setting out that clear vision, as the Prime Minister has been over the past week, travelling right across all the 4 nations of the UK, and indeed his ministers too. We've had the Cabinet Minister without portfolio, Party Chairman Richard Holden, down in Rochester and Stroud and Gillingham and Raynham in the past week, talking to voters about that positive vision. And I think we're getting a good response on the doorstep. So we'll keep doing that. Everything's to play for, and we'll do that every day over the next 5 weeks.
One of the things that was announced over the weekend was the suggestion that the national service would be brought back for 18-year-olds, where they could either serve a year in the armed forces or do some sort of community work 1 weekend a month. I mean, is that a policy that you support?
It is, yeah. I think look at the public polling around it and look at the work that particularly Onward did. They were a think tank that did a lot of work on this over the past 12 months. Look, it's an option. It's military service, or the alternative is volunteering within the community on one Saturday a month. And I think the community benefits in particular that will provide could be pretty transformational. And I think, look, it's not just that we're outlining as a package. I mean, today the Prime Minister's in the southwest, talking about 100,000 new apprenticeships a year. So it needs to be considered in the whole. And over the forthcoming weeks, the Prime Minister will be outlining that plan, which is underpinned, as I just said, with bold action, and things such as national service, the 100,000 more apprenticeships that we've outlined every year today, really demonstrate that the Prime Minister's willing to take those decisions for the long-term interests of the United Kingdom. I
mean, you say there that it's sort of national service receives some support. I mean, for some YouGov polling earlier this week showed that the only group that really supported it was the over 65s, who obviously are not 18 and so won't be required to do the national service. I mean, is it even realistic? Because the armed forces are quite smaller than they used to be. Even if everyone wanted to do the full year in military service, we wouldn't really be able to cope with that, would we? It's not a real plan, is it?
Well, it absolutely is. I mean, the Prime Minister's outlined it. There's a paper that's sat alongside it, and indeed it will be featuring the manifesto that will be launched in the coming weeks, with the whole package of measures for children and young people and education and defence. It's a plan that will work. The Prime Minister's demonstrated through reallocating funds from the UK Share Prosperity Fund and from a number of other methods, including through the non-dom status review that the Chancellor of the Exchequer announced in the last budget, demonstrates that it's financially feasible. And in terms of the deliverability of the plan, it absolutely is. And it's not just, as I say, about military service. As a volunteering option will allow 18-year-olds to volunteer within their community as well. And I think we've got so many opportunities actually right across the UK for young people to be able to do that. So I think it is a very positive policy. And it demonstrates once again that the Prime Minister's got a clear plan and willing to take that bold action to deliver long-term for the United Kingdom.
Now, for those who aren't aware, maybe aren't as familiar with Medway politics, you're sort of 23, is that right? Or have you turned
24 now?
24 now. Happy birthday. So, I mean, if this policy had come in a couple of years ago, you yourself would have been necessary for you to do some of this. I mean, you call it volunteering, but it is required. It's conscripted. So, I mean, would you really have appreciated being told, what to do with your time?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I've been volunteering since I was about 13. I was a youth council member when I was 13.
But my point is, you chose to do those things rather than being sort of mandated by the government.
Well, I think, look, I mean, I would personally be up for it. I think, as I say, I think I've already done it. But I think in terms of actually children and young people now being up for it, it's not just about being seen as a chore. It's about improving community relations and about building a strong society for the future. And as I say, it demonstrates that the Prime Minister is willing to take action, which right now some might not find popular, but actually long term it will deliver stronger young people that as they leave education or indeed college or training after they after they either graduate or leave education, have that opportunity of two and the experience from volunteering or indeed national service. So I think it is a good idea, and I think there's definitely strong merits in it.
Now, there are 3 Medway seats, obviously, and Kelly Tolhurst for Rochester and Stroud is standing again, so is Raymond Chishti for Gillingham and Raynham. It's just been announced very, very recently that Nathan Gamester will take on Chatham and Aylesford after Tracy Crouch announced she'd be stepping down in February. Why did you choose, or why was Nathan Gamester chosen for Chatham and Aylesford?
Yeah, so I should just add, I'm not a member of Chatham and Aylesford Conservatives, so he was elected last night by members of the association. But look, he's a very well-respected and experienced candidate. He's had a strong career in business at the Centre for Social Justice and been involved. He stood in 2 previous local elections within the southeastern London. He's got really strong track record of campaigning. He's been out, understands how to engage with the community and how to engage with residents. And as I say, he's also got that tenacity and that drive to be out and advocate and fight for every one of those issues. So I think Nathan's going to be a fantastic member of Parliament. And I'm really delighted that he's been selected by members in Chatham and Aylesford.
Do you think that the fact that he's not a Chatham and Aylesford native, he is from elsewhere, will harm his chances?
No, I don't think so. I think people over the next, as I say, it's a long campaign. We've got another 5.5 weeks to go. And Nathan's going to be out introducing himself, meeting voters, and talking about the things that are important to them. But obviously also he'll be standing on that clear Conservative platform that I've referenced, of that clear plan, taking bold action for a secure future. And that will be what he will also be standing on. So it's not just Nathan, it's also the work of this government and of the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, that members of the public will ultimately also face a decision in terms of who they vote for. So it's, as I say, he's going to introduce himself and he'll be out there campaigning for every vote over the next few weeks. And residents will know from their experience of having a Conservative Member of Parliament in Tracy for the last 14 years, her strong community advocacy and the role that she's had in terms of driving things for the people of Chatham and Aylesford. So I think he's going to be an exceptional Member of Parliament.
In terms of this clear plan and the bold action you keep referencing, for the 3 Medway seat, what would that actually look like? If the Conservatives are returned on July the 5th, what will that look like for Medway?
Well, look, improving education for me is the closest thing we've got to a silver bullet, really, for our young people. And I think the Prime Minister today, we've just watching before I came on to talk with you, talking about how we've massively driven up standards since Labour left office in 2010. And as I say today, we're going further by scrapping some of those degrees that are not giving young people the skills that they need, and using that funding to bring forward another 100,000 new apprenticeships. And we're going to be benefiting from those in Medway. But look, it's not just that. We've also got a plan, as announced yesterday, the Triple Lock Plus, which will build, particularly for those pensioners that sole income is a state pension, ensuring that they have security in retirement, and they and protecting their income from income tax on their state pension for the first time in history. So all of those things combined, demonstrate real change. But we've also got on the NHS a clear plan in terms of falling waiting lists. We've seen with inflation now back down to just slightly above target, with it getting below that target later in the year. So things are improving. And I say to anybody in Medway, when I'm knocking on the doors, as I am nearly every day, look at what Rishi Sunak has delivered since he became Prime Minister. Look at what he's outlining compared to Keir Starmer and the 3 Labour candidates in Medway that aren't outlining any plan. I'm not hearing anything from them. They're interested in taking the easy way out, and it leads to an uncertain future because we don't know what they're going to do when they get into office.
Now, just to close, the polls aren't really looking very positive for the Conservatives. In Rochester and Stroud, electoral calculus says there's a 79% chance of Labour winning. In Gillingham Raynham, that's a 75% chance of Labour winning, and in Chatham and Aylesford, that's a 57% chance of Labour winning. How many of the 3 Medway seats do you think the Conservatives will realistically still hold on July the 5th?
Well, we're fighting, as I say, for every single vote. So I would very much hope every single one. And I think that, as I say, our 3 candidates, as we've now got, are going to be out every single day between now and polling day, articulating that clear vision, talking about the bold action that the Prime Minister is going to take, and looking ahead to the future. We're going to be out talking to residents about that. And the Prime Minister will be doing the same, whether it be in the Southwest where he is today, whether it be in the West Midlands where he was yesterday, or indeed whether it be in Buckinghamshire where he was the day before. So we will be out, the Prime Minister will be out, ministers will be out every day articulating that vision. We'll keep showing the bold action that we're willing to take across all policy areas. We've got the manifesto still to come. And indeed, we've got the all-important TV debates. And I'm looking forward to seeing the Prime Minister on Tuesday up against Keir Starmer, who so far has not really said a lot and has tried to get out of debating the Prime Minister every week. So I'm looking forward to seeing what he has to say. And as I say, I'm confident that with our three excellent candidates, will be, fighting hard in every seat and looking to take them all back and returning Conservative members of Parliament, because people in Medway know that only with Conservative members of Parliament can they ensure that those opportunities are delivered for people in Medway and right around the UK.
Finally, very last question. Last week we had Keir Starmer in Medway. Do you think the Prime Minister Rishi Sunak will be visiting anytime soon?
Look, the Prime Minister is very interested in what's going on in Medway. The last time I spoke to him at the end of last year at our party conference, he was right on the money asking me about what we were up to in Medway, what our three MPs are up to and how things were going on Medway Council. I know the Prime Minister's got great interest in what goes on here, and I'm pretty sure, I'm very much hope that the Prime Minister will pop by and say hello to people in Medway at some point during the campaign. But he's got a very busy diary, and we shall see.
Councillor George Perfect, leader of the Medway Tories, thank you very much.
Thank you.
That was George Perfect in conversation with Robert, who is back with us now. OK, listen, this week saw Rishi Sunak's latest ploy was to float the idea of introducing national service. That appeared in the Sunday newspapers and kind of not been forgotten about since. The idea is that people can either join the army at 18 or they can do one weekend of sort of community service once a month, sort of 25 days per year. So it's not been a vote winner, for as we can see. It hasn't done anything to the polls. In fact, the polls have gone even further backwards. So what do you think of that then, Dan?
If you told a satire writer that they would come up with this kind of thing as a immediate ploy to try and get votes, they would say it's too on the nose. I think it's, they must have some kind of focus groups or polling which tell them this is a good idea. But it seems to me that it's probably come from the mind of some Tory advisor who has a certain idea of a stereotype Tory voter, a retired colonel wearing red corduroys living in the countryside. Whether that group of people exists in large enough numbers to change the polls, probably not. True, but it's just it's such a strange policy announcement, because it's not like the other similarly controversial matters like the death penalty, where occasionally somebody will mention it, or you'll get some politician go rogue and announce their support for bringing back hanging. National service is something that hasn't really been in discussion in this country for a very long time, since it was abolished in the 50s. So it seems a pretty ill-fated attempt to garner votes that realistically probably don't exist. And not to mention, it's not controversial to say that the Tories' core vote is in general older people and pensioners, and they've not done particularly well by young people over the past 15 years, and then they tell them, in exchange for all of this, you're going to either serve in the army or be conscripted into the NHS for one weekend a month or whatever.
I won't repeat what my 22-year-old daughter said and thought about national service, but it was certainly not repeatable now here. Something not unaligned to that were the idea that's being floated by Starmer, votes for 16-year-olds. Now, it's already been done in Scotland. Is there any chance that will come along the way here?
Well, my reading of it, Simon, is that it's highly unlikely to happen.
If you can join the army at 16, if you can do any number of other things when you're 16, like become a father or whatever, surely...
Yeah, I can see all the arguments
yeah,
for it, but I just don't think there's the political appetite or will.
Is it because it's likely to be too left-wing?
Well, some people might say that. I wouldn't necessarily agree.
So why do you think it's not likely to come?
Well, I just think of myself as a callow teenager growing up, having rather different interests than politics. I know that is quite usual for callow teenagers like I was. But I just don't see there being a big groundswell of support for the idea amongst younger people. There seem to be any different number of opinions about the idea amongst that group. And you could say, if 16, why not 15 or why not 17? So I think I would need to be persuaded by some
powerful evidence that this was a positive thing to do, and at the moment, I don't think there is.
Well, if you dropped it to 16, all you would get, or the only people who would vote at 16 are those motivated and interested enough to do so, in which case you wouldn't be getting people who weren't mature enough to vote.
Well, you don't know, do you?
No. Well, look at 18-year-olds, look at 28-year-olds, 48-year-olds. I mean, some of them,
Yeah, maybe there should be an upper limit.
Yeah, yes. I think somebody said that earlier on, didn't
you?
You
can't vote until you're 50.
Robert Boddy, I think, said something along the lines.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, maybe there should be a cap at 65. You shouldn't be able to vote anymore. I don't know. But, it's similarly, we were talking about national service. I think the group that does support national service the most is the over 65s. So I think possibly it might be a suggestion that not 18-year-olds should do national service, but over 65s. They're keen on it.
Okay. Just finally, one thing I wanted to touch upon was the whole sort of farrago surrounding Diane Abbott. I mean, she's been an MP for 37 years, and yet Keir Starmer apparently knew that the investigation and the inquiry into her conduct had been concluded months before, and only this week has been readmitted and given the whip. But on the understanding, perhaps, that she doesn't stand. Where this all goes in the next few days, we don't really know. But it makes you wonder that Diane Abbott, for all her outspoken views and her support for Jeremy Corbyn, is probably closer to many people in the Labour Party than the likes of Natalie Elphicke, who joined it a couple of weeks ago. Paul, what do you think of that?
I think you've summed it up quite well there, Simon. Yeah. I think the problem that some people in the Labour Party have with it is that they did accept Natalie Elphicke into the party, who is probably as far to the right as you can be, using the argument that the Labour Party was a broad party which accepted people with a wide range of different views about things. But I don't think that's cut the mustard.
The substance of their views and the relationship between Natalie Elphicke being allowed in the party and Diane Abbott's position being questionable is secondary to the more naked political calculation of it. And it seems to me pretty obvious that the calculation Starmer has made is that and his leadership of the Labour Party is that it serves them perfectly well to annoy the activist base of the Labour Party who really, really like Diane Abbott, because they think that in the eyes of the general public, not allowing someone like her back into the party will be advantageous. But I mean, it definitely doesn't sit well among rank and file Labour Party members.
I mean, the other thing about it is that the allegation is that Starmer knew about this investigation report and sat on it, basically, which is rather damaging.
Such chicanery in the official processes of the Labour Party isn't new under any particular leadership, so...
OK, folks, that's your lot this week. Thanks to Rob, Dan, Paul and to our special guest, George Perfect. We'll have another packed pod next week, and I hope you can join us then. You can now follow us on X, formerly Twitter. Just search for Kent Politics Podcast. And also don't forget to tune in to KMTV at 5 p.m. each Friday for their politics show. All the best now.
Thanks for listening to the Kent Politics Podcast. Don't forget to check out stories throughout the week on the politics page of Kent Online. And you can watch the Kent Politics Show with Rob Bailey on KMTV every Friday at 5 p.m. or on demand at kmtv.co.uk.
This has been an I Am Listening original podcast. For more information, head over to our website, im-listening.co.uk.